You know, I think Godot has the best menu system of any game engine I've ever used, especially recently. That's why it makes me very sad when indie devs put out games with the worst possible menus. It only takes like 10 minutes to make a menu that rocks. So let's talk a little bit about how to not make shitty menus. Step 1, program Mass Effect. Okay, we've programmed Mass Effect. Let's give Mass Effect a main menu. You hit escape and what do you see? Every game needs a main menu. Here's an example. If you've ever used Godot before, you've probably done this. Put a panel container. It's a main menu. It should go in the middle. Add in a VBox. Add in buttons. Boom, boom, boom. This one can be resume. This is save load. This is options. This one is exit, quit. You do not want to use terms like exit or cancel in menus because it's very ambiguous as to what you're canceling or exiting. It's better to use more precise language like quit and resume. This is the menu you have probably seen hundreds of times if you prototype in Godot, or if you've done game jams in Godot, or if you've played game jam games in Godot. This should be a very familiar sight. This is simply unacceptable. It is simply not a good menu. So let's make it into a good menu. But first we got to wire it up. So we're going to go ahead and do %sign menu. That % makes it a unique name, which means we can access it via, say, a script, which I have set up over here. If you hit escape, it toggles the menu. If you hit resume, it cancels the menu. But of course that requires the resume button to actually be hooked up, which it's not. We'll go over to signals and hook it up. Boom, there we are. Now if we run this, we can resume it, we can hit escape, pop it up, pop it down, boom, 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 easy peasy, right? This is a terrible menu. This is the worst possible thing to see when you pop up a main menu. Let's go over some of the big problems we have with it. The first problem is that the main menu needs to own the screen. It needs to make it very clear that you are paused. You are no longer able to play the game. One big way to do that is to simply add a lot more screen real estate to the menu. And to do that, we're just going to come over here to the menu item, and we are going to make a theme override. Let's go over in 2D so we can see it happen. And you can see that we are overriding. Let's make it dark and blue and mostly transparent. Content margins are the secret sauce. This is something that a lot of newbies do not understand how to use. Fundamentally, Godot has two kinds of UI nodes. Normal nodes and containers. This is a panel container, and so is the VBox. It's a VBox container. Containers try to control their child nodes, and they also try to become big enough to contain their child nodes. And this combination means that you can't just move these buttons around. Like we try, it'll give us errors. This is something that confuses a lot of people, and they try and work around it, but the answer is you don't work around it. You almost never have to work around it. You just have to make the containers do their job. And that's gotten a lot easier in the past few versions of Godot. So let's go ahead and just keep polishing up this visual a little bit. You might be tempted to, let's go ahead and add in some borders, 1, 1, 1, 5. You might be tempted to add in some corner radiuses, but I am sad to tell you that this makes your menus look like they came out of RPG Maker, which is probably not what you want. So I don't recommend using corner radiuses. We'll talk a little bit more about how to customize this look, in a minute, but in general, corner radiuses are to be used only if you have a strong idea of what you're using them for. Otherwise, you will look like you made your whole thing in RPG Maker. But let's go ahead and give it a shadow. Nothing like bringing in a shadow to bulk it up. And with just that much, we already have a menu that feels like it's dominating the screen substantially better than it did before. We might even change this white border to be more blue to be in tune with the Mass Effect feel, right? No big deal. We can also override the buttons. If you've never tried to customize buttons before, they have a bunch of different things, and that's because every possible mode the button can be in is its own set of themes, which is extremely annoying, but that's how it is. We're going to go ahead and override normal for now. Just make it dark and blue, and we will give it some borders, maybe 5111. And in this case, I'm going to give it just a touch of corner on the left, like so, just to make it a little bit interesting. And content margins, 10, 5, 5, 5. And that'll give us just a little bit of a button that makes some sense. We can copy this, bang, select all the other buttons, go down into their theme overrides, and set them up. Boom. Now if we wanted to change the font size or font color, those are in different areas. It's a little bit involved to change the shape and size of buttons, but that's okay. There's always one thing that's annoying. There we are. We now have a menu that doesn't look quite so bad. And you can see that when we highlight it, it changes modes. That's what we were talking about. Over here, they've got normal and hover and click and all sorts of stuff like that. We're just going to deal with the normal for now. But this menu still isn't quite good enough for our purposes. We really want to make sure that the player understands that the game is paused. And the classic way to do that is to blur the screen. So that's why I've got this panel here. This panel has a blur shader, a blur material. There's millions of these. You can just cut and paste from anywhere you'd like. It's just this. So if you search for blur Godot shader, you will find it. It is trivial. So I'm not going to explain how to do it, but I will explain how to try and use it in a menu. The first thing we have to do is put the menu into that shader, or into that panel, so that it is part of the same affair. Then we want to make sure that this is no longer called menu. We're going to call this menu panel, and then we can have this panel be called menu. And now, we got the same setup as before, but the game is now blurred. Much better, right? But this is still pretty basic, right? Can we spruce this up a little bit more? There's a couple of ways to spruce up menus. One of the ways to spruce up menus is to use panels. So we can do that by adding in a child node that is a panel rather than a panel container. No, that's not how you spell it. That's how you spell it. Panels do not try to control the shape and size of their children. Panel containers do. So if we add a panel, this panel is a child of a container. So its size is controlled. So what we would want to do is we would want to set it to empty so that it's no longer visible. And then what we can do is we can add in another panel, because now that this panel is a child of a panel, this can be any size and any shape. You don't even have to make this a panel, to be honest. We could change this to just being a control, which isn't even a rendered object. So we can do whatever we want, right? And if we were to take this panel and copy this style box from the parent and paste it into the child, we can have something that is similar to the parent without any extra work, but it's on top of the parent, which is, maybe that's what we want, but in many cases it's not. So in order to change this, we can just move this panel to being rendered behind. So here is our ordering. We can drop it down. Oh, but it vanished entirely. That's because of a complicated thing we've got going on where we're actually not rendering a game, we're just rendering a screenshot. So to fix that, we're going to take the menu and we're going to bring it forward one. Boom. Now we've got it behind the menu, see? And we can use this to bulk up our menu and create whatever sort of special elements we want. And it takes really no time at all. It's not exactly the coolest thing you can do, but it is fast and easy, so it's worth doing if you don't have any better ideas, right? The other thing we can do is we can also do something like skew it. Here, 0.1. And you can see now everything is skewed. But the buttons aren't skewed. Well, we could skew the buttons. But even if we skew them individually, they're not skewed coming down. You see that? We have them vertically coming down in an exact line, even though this feels like it should be rotated, right? Now, previously, this would have been an extremely annoying situation, but nowadays, it is quite trivial, because what we can do is we can come over here to the VBox container that's aligning these buttons, and we can come down into Offset Transform, turn this on, and tilt it. Oh, look at that. But now all the buttons are tilted. Well, we can go into all the buttons, turn in Offset Transform back on, and untilt them. Oh, look at that. Now we have aligned buttons on a curvy, sloped system. I'm just kind of putting this together in a heartbeat to show you how easy it is to make something that doesn't look like an RPG Maker menu. But you can see that this very clearly feels like it is a menu that the game, this is the main menu. The game is like, hey, pay attention, this is the big menu. And maybe, you can spend all day tweaking this. We could make it opaque, for example. It might be a little bit better opaque. We could add in details like screws and stuff, but we have to start talking about some of the other things this menu is missing. One of the most important things that people overlook when they're doing their menus is animations. The human brain does not act in one-frame bursts. The human brain is built to process at a speed that helps us catch bananas. So, if you're moving faster than a thrown banana, the human eye is not going to really understand what's going on. What we really want to do is when the player hits escape, we want the game to say, okay, we are now moving out of the game context and into the menu context. We want it to be fast. It should take less than a second, but we want it to be there. We need to move into the main menu context because otherwise the player is going to kind of lose their connection. So to do that, we're going to add in animations. And animations are super easy. You just go to whatever item you'd like to animate and add an animation to it. There it is. Animation player. Boom. There. And here it is. Pops up nice and tidy. We can add in a new animation, which we'll call fade in. Now here in this, we can add whatever we want as part of our animation. So we got this menu here. If we take a look, we've got these blur parameters, and you can see that if we change these blur parameters, we get a different amount of blur. So we can actually blur in if we can control these parameters, which is precisely what we're going to do. So we can add in the object by going to here and selecting the menu, and then we can select the material, like so. Boom. This is the material. But we don't want to actually animate the material, because the material is correct. We want to animate the blur parameter on the material. Good news, it's quite easy. You just click this button. Pew! Pew! There it is. Blur. So we'll put this in at, say, 0.3. So here at 0, it'll be 0, 0, which is clear. And then at 0.3, we'll have it be 3, 3. And so now what we want to do is when this menu comes into existence, we want this to play, which we can do by clicking this button here. Autoplay on load. Boom. Easy enough, right? Now when we hit play, you can see how it spends 1/3 of a second blurring in. But I do have to admit we are doing a little bit of a trick here because we're just setting the visible to true and false, and that's not how you should do menus. Menus really need to be their own item. So for that, we are simply going to save the branch as a scene, and we will call it menu.xln. And then up here, we can just drop that in by holding Control, Pew, and then we can delete it. Pew, it's gone. And then here, we can simply have this menu be the thing that we control. So var menu, and then here we can say if menu dot queueFree. We'll do that for now. And then we'll say menu equals null. And then here we can say if there is no menu, create a menu. Menu equals menu dot instantiate. Easy peasy. And down here we say menu dot queueFree, menu equals null. Easy as that. So now when we hit escape, menu pops up. It did not pop up because we are still hiding it, right? I forgot to fix that part. Come over here into the main menu here. Just pop it up. It should work. Why is it not working? This should work. This is interesting. What's going on here? What did I screw up? Alright, so if we look over here at the remote, we can see what's going on, and there is no menu being popped up. Oh, we forgot to add it. Hey. This sorts of problems happen a lot. So you got to actually add the menu. You could add it to the root, or you can add it to the screen, whatever. It doesn't really matter at this point. There we are. Easy peasy. See that? Isn't that nice, that blur effect coming in? But we would like this to also come in, so let's go over and edit that in. So if we come back over here, we can start our animation for... We want this animation to happen in 2 sections. We want to spend the first third of a second leaving the game screen, which is what the blurring is for. So during that time, we want this menu to actually be invisible. Then we want to bring the menu in, and there's a lot of ways to do that. We're going to go ahead and use a fade-in technique. So here in the animation player, we are going to add in the menu panel here, and we're going to use a modulate. Here it is. Modulate changes the color of it, and that includes if it is transparent. So we can add in a node here at 0.3 or so. And we can add another node in over here, 0.7 or so. We want it to be white over here. Oh, that's not 0.7, that is 7. Hold on, how long is this animation? Oh, we're in reset. Very funny. So the reset animation, which we only fell into because of all my clicking around and desperate flailing, this is what the defaults are when you don't have an animation playing. That's often going to be important for you to set up. We actually want fade in, obviously. So let's try that again. Let's bring in this menu panel here. And once again, modulate. And now we can add in a color here and over here at like 0.6 or so. Yeah, there we are. So this one is going to be completely transparent. And then at 0.6, it is completely opaque. Whoom, like that, see? But that doesn't finish what we're trying to do, because we would also like to bring the buttons in. Shoof, 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 shoof. So let's go ahead and set that up. Obviously, you don't have to do it exactly like I'm doing it. The point is how easy it is to do it. So we're going to select a button over here, and we are going to use the offset transform position. These offset transforms are recently added, and you've already seen them in use because we used them to tilt everything. Now, if you don't have that button clicked, this won't work. It'll actually prevent you from even making any changes to the keys. But in this case, we're going to want to just bring in them from far off screen, maybe negative 1,000. So we bring, maybe it's a little bit earlier than that, but it's okay. So from this point, what we can do is just repeat the process for the other buttons. You can also have each button have its own animation player, whatever you prefer to do. This is a system where all of the methods of doing this are pretty decent. So, just play around with it until you find a way you like. It only takes 10 or 15 minutes to do a whole menu, no problem. So now we've got all of the buttons having their own track. Boom, boom, boom. We can just grab these and paste them in. Boom, boom, boom. And we can adjust them so that they come in at different times. Like that. And now, if we were to run this, here's our main menu coming in. See? We can also bring these in even later, while our main menu animation has to be completely done by 1 second. In fact, even earlier is better. In fact, because even earlier is better, let's actually bring them in a little bit earlier, make it done by 0.9 or so. But we can continue animating for as long as we want, as long as the buttons aren't moving, because that allows the player to click the buttons. So we do want to be able to have those buttons get clicked very reliably, but we can still put in secondary animations. For example, we want all of these additional panels to kind of dart in. So let's bring them in from the sides, from the top and the bottom to be more precise. So go ahead and property track panel 1, and again it is offset transform position, and then this one is here. Again, offset transform position. And we can simply insert a value around here. Oh, that's a marker. We want a key. And we can make this have a negative 500y, and that'll make it come in from the side, except we forgot to turn on offset transform. Look at that. So now it'll come in from offside, see? And we can do the same for the second one. Okay, that didn't work. Oh, because we are... it always pastes to this blue line, which is a little bit strange, but that's okay. So if we want to do that, we can bring this one in from the other side. I'll call it 500. And I think we just overrode both. We did, because we're just brilliant like that. So We can also change it from the kind of curve it is. Currently it's linear. We don't really want a linear curve. We want it to be more like this. So we'll just do that. And it's the same with all of these. All of these could really use a spicier input, right? So this is, it starts slow and moves fast. Let's actually reverse that. There we are. So now when we pop up the menu, see? Now there is no actual sound in play yet, but adding sound is extremely easy. You can actually put sounds in the animation menu. It is trivial to do so. So if we were to want to do that, we could just add in audio playback track. See? We can add in methods and blend shapes. We can do anything we want here. The key is that by the time we reach 1 second, the menu should have stopped moving buttons. All the buttons should be well in place by then, even earlier if possible. But we can continue doing secondary animations all day. In fact, you can have animations that just play forever. We could add in a screw to our setup here so that there is just something going on at all times. So to do that, we might say, here in the panel, let's add another panel. And we will put that little box, ordering 1. There we are. And we can move that over to here. Yeah, that'll be okay. And then we can just change the visual and make it round, which we can do by simply increasing the corner radius to something absurd like this, right? And this is just a demonstration, so we'll go ahead and we'll add in one more child node, which will be a horizontal separator, like that. Except for it's not in the middle, so we're going to want to make it in the middle, like that. And that's like super, super basic, right? We're not too worried about it. We could change the size so that it's a little bit less big, and put it here. And I'm just doing this to show you that it can be done because you can simply add its own animation player. And then we could have the animation like this. Make it play automatically, make it loop forever, and we will simply add in this track. So if we were to, I've shown you clicking plus to add the tracks. You can actually add them more directly by selecting the item that you're trying to do something with, and we can select the specific thing we're looking to do. Kapow. Boom, there it is. You don't need to actually hit plus every time. This also allows you to select multiple things and add all the keys for all of the objects, which would have been an easier way to do the buttons. Anyway, over here at 1, we want to add another key, and this will be 360. So what it'll do is it'll spin, and then it'll repeat forever. And if we were to start that up, you can see we now have an infinitely spinning little screw. Obviously, you can make the screw look better in any number of ways, but we now have it working. Now, one thing I haven't gone over is 9 slicing. So let's go ahead and just add in a panel to show you what 9 slicing is. In this game engine alone, Godot alone pretty much, it is called 9 patch. That is incorrect. It is not called 9 patch. It is 9 slice. The reason it is 9 slice rather than 9 patch is because 9 patch is a well-established quilting technique. So if you want to learn how to make beautiful quilts, handmade quilts, you can use the 9 patch technique. If you want to learn how to do video game shit, you use the 9 slice technique. But 9 patch or 9 slice, either way, there are loads of these images available for free, and it just makes a very easy way to set up a visual that doesn't require you to use the built-in the built-in panel sizes and shapes and stuff. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and load up one. Good news, I imported some from Kenny. Kenny has a ton of free stuff, including a bunch of these fantasy toggles here. Now the idea with a 9 slice is that when you scale it, it does not distort. But as you can see, it is distorting rather badly. The reason for that is because we haven't set it up. So let's set it up. Boom. Here we are. And now, no matter how we resize it, you can see that there's no stretching and no distortion at all. So this is a great way to set up your menu. And you don't have to worry about the color because you can always change the modulation, or even just the self-modulation, to any color you want. And you can stack these. So if we wanted to, we could have another duplicate of this set up on top of it and make it just a little bit smaller or whatever. We could use a panel inside of it, a panel container inside of it to change this. And we could change this to another, setup. Boom. We can do anything we want with these, and we can make some really obvious and nice menus. Now, you do not have to do art for these yourself. You can just find these pieces of art on the internet, but it is also very easy to do this art for yourself, especially if you're a pixel artist. And obviously, you can also do things with skewing and such, but you do have to be aware that these are not containers, and they do not take any theme overrides. So if you wanted to skew them, you would have to put them inside of a panel that can skew. A panel container, most probably, to show you that. If we drop them inside of the panel container here, you can see that they do not skew. Okay, well, apparently they... No, I guess they... Oh wait, it's inside the VBox container that we were doing the skewing. Alright, well, we'll put them inside the VBox container. They do skew, as you can see. They also act a little strange because the VBox container really wants them to be a specific size. But I'm just kind of showing you some of the stuff that you can do. So now that we have the menu popping in correctly, you might notice that when we press escape, it just vanishes. That's equally bad. We need to basically play that animation backwards. So what we need to do is we need to have a delay between when we play an animation backwards to get rid of it and when we actually delete it. The easiest way to do that is to have a function here in the menu. So we're going to have it be a built-in script. We don't need to save it separately. We could save it separately if we're planning to use it on a lot of different menus. But for now, this will work fine. And what we will do is we will simply add in a function for destroying the panel. And so when we do this, we're going to want to play an animation. So let's go ahead and call this anims. And we can say anims.play. And we can choose whatever we want. In this case, fade in. Now the rest of these are where we get interesting. We don't need a custom blend, but we would like to play it backwards twice as fast. Yeah, see? And then what we can do is we can await anims.finished. And then we can cue free. Like that. Easy as that, see? So the only change we need to make over here is we want this to not actually destroy it. This is not what we want to do. We want to tell it to destroy itself. Like that. Easy as that. Now the reason that it's not popping up and trying to help me out is because it doesn't understand that the menu we're instantiating has that function. You can make it understand that. I'm not going to bother right now. See? You can also obviously have a custom opposite animation that does something else if you're particular to something else. For example, I often like to burn the animation away, stuff like that. To burn the menu away, stuff like that. But this works fine. The other thing we can do here is this on resume pressed no longer works. The reason for that is because this button is not connected anymore. It's not even in the same ballpark. If we were to look at the button, this is no longer connected because we can't connect a button in this scene to a button in this scene. Except we can. There's a couple of ways to do it. One of the easiest ways to do it is we don't actually need this scene to do this. We can just delete that. Instead, we can tell the menu to do it to itself. So if we were to come over here, button pressed, and we want to have a resume button pressed, we can simply say it here instead. But there are other ways to make this menu connect to the parent object. The easiest way would be through either a global signal bus, which you can look up if you'd like, or by assigning it here. If we make this a class that exists, class name something something something, we can add in signals that are easy to sign up for. So we could add in signals that tell the game world that this has done something. I recommend that you learn as much as you can about signals. They are extremely important to Godot. They wire everything together. But I thought you might want to see how easy it is to create, a decent menu in Godot. Now, obviously, this is not a super polished, cool menu of Doom, but you can turn it into one. a few custom shaders, some custom art that has some, some pixel stuff going on, some noise effects. All of that stuff is pretty trivial if you have the inclination to do it. In addition, we didn't do any of the cool stuff that you can do, like, for example, when these buttons start coming in, we could knock this around a little bit and change the skew or the rotation just a touch so that it feels like they're impacting with some velocity. All that is changing the animation to include other values. So, for example, if we were to come up here to the menu panel and look at it over here, this menu panel is the one that is in the core here. So if we were to go ahead and add in the offset transform capability, by the way, keep an eye on visual only. Sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. For us, it's fine either way. But here we can just go ahead and key in this rotation. Pew, like this. So this offset rotation, we can put it here, and then have a new key here, and then have a new key over here. And this key here, we can have it be 3 degrees. And now you can see that it sort of feels like it is being knocked around. And we can put in just little knocks over and over as each one of these collides. And we can change the values however we want. Nope, way too much. And so if you want to see how that looks, a little bit of liveliness, right? This is all the stuff you can do if you have any idea how. Using the offset transform allows you to make these menus feel more vibrant and alive, like that. Little things go a long way. It just takes a couple of minutes to make a menu into a menu that players will enjoy looking at. The same is true for all menus and even things like character sheets. If it's a UI element that the player pulls up, you need to make sure that it is animated in such a way that the player understands that it's coming and understands what's important and what happens. In this case, we might want to even punch it up a little bit more so that the quit button is a different color, or maybe turns a different color. We could add in all sorts of other graphics to the side or whatever we want. We do not have to be done here. We can keep polishing this forever. And the best thing is, all of this stuff is independent of all of the other stuff you're doing in your game. I mean, you can reuse it if you want, but it's not going to interfere with, say, your character health system. You don't have to worry about accidentally creating spaghetti code with these animations because they're self-contained. You're just animating the menu, and it takes maybe half an hour if you do a complicated menu. So why not just start over if you screw something up? It doesn't really matter. The art assets can be reused. If I create a screw asset for this screw, I can use it again no problem in another menu or when recreating the same menu. So don't make boring menus, please. Also, you may have noticed, I think I fixed my mic problem. Hooray! It was really miserable. I couldn't record any voiceover stuff for like a year. See ya.